Tennessee's top law enforcement agency fudging the truth to get around a state law designed to help veterans get back on their feet.
That's the accusation from a former employee of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation who came to News Channel 5 Investigates. That sent our chief investigative reporter Phil Williams digging through hundreds of pages of TBI personnel documents. Phil?
Well, guys, the law in question says that if a veteran and a non-veteran are equally qualified for a state job, preference will be given to the person who has served his or her country. But the whistleblower says less qualified candidates with connections may sometimes have the edge inside the TBI. When it comes to honoring the nation's veterans, Americans know how to put on a show, but it's the big stuff, like helping the vets to find jobs when they come back home, that's not always so easy.
It's really hard to transition from military to civilian life.
And Melissa Smith knows after serving the Army National Guard for 12 years, a year of that in Iraq, Smith finally got a state job 3 years ago working for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. There inside the Bureau, Smith says she repeatedly complained about the state's top law enforcement agency ignoring a state law. It says preference will be given to veterans for state jobs.
To the point to where I actually printed off the policies and highlighted the sections that were applicable.
Highlighted it in yellow.
Yellow and pink, multiple times.
Why?
Because they weren't listening.
Smith says she watched as the agency gave a coveted special agent job to the stepson of a TBI assistant director, a young man just out of college with no law enforcement experience at all. Among the veterans passed over, a highly regarded state trooper who had been strongly recommended by TBI interviewers, a police officer who interviewers called a great candidate, even a former military intelligence officer who had, quote, good experience with investigating.
As a veteran, I took that as an insult because there were other veterans that were applying that were way more qualified than this young man was.
A year later, the son of TBI's deputy director got hired as a special agent right out of college, as did another recent college graduate who had served as a TBI intern, again bypassing experienced veterans who had served their country. The Bureau's explanation?
From the words that I remember that were told to me is they will hire whoever they want, because it's their choice. They assign the credentials, and that's why they have a legal team.
I'm going to tell you what my attorneys tell me. Shall says you have to, will says you may. That's what I go on.
TBI Director Mark Gwynn says he believes that the law that says veterans will be given preference was actually designed to be read as may be given preference.
I don't believe there was ever any intent to force any agency head to hire anybody. I would be shocked if anybody wrote a law that was going to force an agency head to hire anybody.
So you do not view that as a mandate?
No, I do not.
But that same law requires that if state agencies decide not to hire the veterans who've applied, they must write these letters justifying the decision to bypass the vets. And that's where the TBI sometimes got creative.
This one had been a patrol officer for a very long time, spoke 5 different languages.
News Channel 5 Investigates obtained the letters where over and over the TBI claimed that veterans with actual law enforcement experience were not as qualified as the young men hired straight out of college. They claimed that the veterans didn't have the preferred qualifications of an advanced degree or forensic experience or investigative experience.
That was the one they used most to throw off the veterans that were patrol officers. So officers that are out on the street making arrests, showing up to domestics, that wasn't enough experience because it wasn't investigative.
And yet you're hiring people who have no experience.
No experience at all, yeah. But the veterans letters still say that the people that were chosen have experience.
How can you justify bypassing veterans who don't have the right kind of law enforcement experience when you're hiring people with zero law enforcement experience?
It's not to justify. It's not to justify. What I have to justify is in my heart.
The TBI director says his commitment is to the Bureau and finding the people he feels are most worthy of carrying the TBI badge. So when you look at what those letters have said, do you think, well, that really doesn't look too good?
No, I don't.
When you look at these veterans bypass letters, you think what?
It's all a lie. Every single bit of it's a lie.
all from an agency whose motto is truth, bravery, integrity.
There was no truth in those letters, no integrity in those letters. And no one really at TBI is brave enough to come forward and say anything.
In the end, Smith resigned, she says, out of principle.
If someone's putting something in those letters that don't reflect what should be, we'll tweak the language that's going in those letters.
But Gwynn says he sees a far greater principle at stake.
Sometimes you got to go on what your heart and your gut tells you in my position, that this person's going to be a good agent. And I just hope that never gets taken away from whoever is sitting in this chair. Because if it does, then you're really going to start to get into issues that you don't want to get into.
After she left TBI, Melissa Smith filed a complaint with the commissioner who heads Tennessee's Department of Human Resources. Commissioner Rebecca Hunter never responded, but now we hear some state lawmakers are taking notice of the veterans preference issue. Of course, we'll let you know what happens. Rory?
Phil, thank you. The whistleblower who came to us wants veterans to know they have rights. Go to our website, newschannel5.com, to see what she thinks veterans should do to protect themselves.